Okay, so this portion of the session will be about the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So, and just go big. Okay, so the brief outline is that we'll talk about what the NDIS is, what the system is, what an NDIS plan is and what it actually can include, what the NDIS access criteria is, so how people get onto the scheme, and what the NDIS access process is, so what those steps actually are to get onto the NDIS. Okay. Okay, so the National Disability Insurance Scheme, or NDIS for short, is quite a fairly new system that the federal government brought in 2013 to replace the old system of the way people got funding for the disability supports. So the NDIS is run and organised by the National Disability Insurance Agency, or NDIA, and they work with local area partners to actually roll out the scheme and to assist participants. So in the Melbourne area, our local area partners are the Brotherhood of St Lawrence and La Trobe Community Health. So it's likely that if you're at your planning meetings, planning stages, review meetings, or most of the time just interacting for any issue to do with the plan or the NDIS, you'll probably be talking to somebody from those organisations there if you're in the Melbourne area. It might be a bit different for you, Anthea. I'm not too sure who it is up in Shepparton actually, but it would be most likely a different sort of community organisation, similar to Brotherhood of St Lawrence or La Trobe Community Health. Okay, so the NDIS doesn't necessarily give supports and services. They just give the funding to people to be able to access those types of supports and services. So they're just the source of funding. They give people that funding to be able to access those things and to be able to get their disability needs seen to. So a key theme of the NDIS is choice and control. So what this basically means is that the person, so the person with the disability or the participant, that's what the NDIS use, they call people with NDIS plans participants, that all participants have the sort of opportunity to make the decision as to how they would like to use their funding. They can choose the services they would like to use. They can say if they would like the support in the home or if they would like it at the clinic, if they want to go out into the community to do A, B, C, D. So they have a lot more say as to how they would actually like to use their funding, whereas previously, the older system, there was very little say that the person with the disability actually had as to how they wanted to use their funding. And so the I in NDIS is for insurance. Now you might be thinking why, disability scheme is insurance necessary, but the reason they have insurance, or the I there, is because they take the idea where if we put money and supports and services in place early in someone's life, that it may actually have quite a lot of future and long-term beneficial impacts for that person. Obviously it's very individual, and some people, especially if they're a child, if supports and services are put in place at that point, it can have quite a few positive impacts for that person when they're an adult, just depending on their disability, of course, too. It's very individualistic.
It also has impacts on families.
So you mean the support the family can get?
Yep, because it never was around when I was a kid.
Yeah, so the NDIS's approach to disability is much more holistic, because when we go through what a plan is and what can actually be included, then you'll be able to see the different areas that an NDIS plan can actually be relevant to. So as I was saying, the NDIS plan is quite individual, and it's supposed to be tailored to that person and their needs at that point in their life. So if they're a child, they'll be getting these types of supports. If they're a young adult, maybe wanting to build skills to be able to move out of home, they might get these types of supports. And when there may be somebody looking for work, they'll get these types of supports. So depending on their stage of life and what their disability is, what their what their family supports, what their informal supports are, that will all tailor as to how their NDIS plan will appear.
Can I just raise something to you,
Mm-hmm.
Lisa? I think the NDI should change their name, as in take out that insurance scheme. Because when I work with people from a cold background and I say the word insurance scheme, they think of insurance.
It can be very confusing for those people with language difficulties or language with lack of English skills, because even for people who have been in Australia, even just the thought of like, well, how does insurance come into play with a disability scheme? It does make it a little bit confusing, and it does take a little bit to explain. But I think it definitely is worth explaining to people and to your clients so that they can sort of have that in mind when they are accessing
Why
it.
can't they just call it NDS, National Disability Scheme?
I think there's already a government scheme called NDS. I think it's the National Diabetes something.
Okay. Well, then they can call it anything. Why insurance? You could have come up with, I don't know, group or whatever. You could have said anything. Why does it have to be insurance scheme?
Yeah, I suppose.
I think of that guy from Midnight Oil who had that scheme of, doing all the houses, for the insulation, and the government was giving free insulation to houses, and that all got backfired because that was a scheme, and that's what I think of, and I think that wasn't a pleasant thing. So I don't know.
Like, do you see a scheme as more of a short term?
Well, yeah, I see a scheme as for someone to sit there and go, oh, this is a scheme. Oh, this is for an opportunist. Oh, this is how you rip off the NDIS.
Oh, I see what you mean. There might be certain connotations with the use of the word scheme.
Yeah, insurance scheme. I think you just leave it to National Disability Group or National Disability Organisation.
I suppose because there can be that sort of misunderstanding with some people who may not be fully aware of what it is. It's very important for us who are in the disability sector to properly explain to them what it actually does include and what it does involve, so that they do have a good understanding of what it is, and so they're not misconstrued in any way as to what their first opinion of it might have been, so they can be fully aware of what the reality is and what it can actually offer to them.
Sure.
And just quickly before we move on to the next slide, the NDIS, so it doesn't replace any other supports that other government departments might cover, such as the health department or the education department or even Centrelink. So NDIS doesn't really affect any of those areas, but that's important to keep in mind, because say if somebody has a health condition, the health department would cover that and NDIS wouldn't. So it can, obviously with a person with a disability, sometimes health issues and disabilities can all be very interlinked, especially if there's multiple disabilities. So it's important to sort of maybe have a proper think about that and to talk to your medical and health professionals, so that when you do get to the point, if the person's wanting to apply for the NDIS, so that they can be in a good position to advocate for themselves and say, yes, these are my disability needs and these are maybe more of my health needs.
I know you're not going to enjoy me, Alyssa, but I totally disagree with the NDIS on that, because there are some things that I believe that impact on my disability impacts on outside of the NDIS criteria. One of those things would be a few years ago they asked me last year they asked me what my goal was. I said that I wanted to finish my diploma, and then the government cut the funding for the disability sector at my school, and the NDIS would help me. I'm like, well, why do you want to know what I want to do in my life then? If it's not, if it's goal orientated, if you're not going to help me with it, what relevance is it to you what I want to do? I mean, if you're going to help me with it, yes, I can see the relevance.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not going to help me with it, then don't ask those questions. They're very personal.
Yeah, exactly. I could definitely see that. And I suppose because we are still at the very early stages of the NDIS, there's probably many things that those who were writing the regulation and those who were making the structure really haven't thought about for those who have disabilities. It must have been October last year when there were a few changes to what people could actually access with an NDIS plan, so that a few more sort of like disability related health conditions could be sort of more covered with an NDIS plan, such as maybe podiatry or I think CPAP machines and epilepsy. Those types of needs could then be covered with an NDIS plan. Previous to that, people couldn't get those types of supports. But there seemed to be feedback going back to NDIA that these actually do sort of can stem from and can impact on a person's disability. So therefore it should come under their NDIS plan. So I suppose it's only through feedback and that the NDIS can really see that this is being an issue for you. And while you're not getting assistance from the education department because they've cut the funding. So if I'm not getting it from anywhere else, then surely it has to come from the NDIS. And they only really pick up on those things when it's said to them. They're not going to know about it if they're not told about it and feedback isn't given. And we can just hope, as has done in October, that maybe changes can be made to the regulations and how somebody can use their plan to maybe include support in those like diplomas or further education.
Someone has their hand up, I think. We'll check.
Yeah, me. It's me.
Yeah, Joy?
Yeah, could I ask one question? So because that is insurance idea, so they show the lifelong support, but they keep some part just kept the building this funding always there, but another funding they always cut every year, maybe cut more and more. So what I thinking, some maybe India still they still need more money, or they want to cut lots of funding for the NDIS specific pay. Yeah,
it can be, especially when you're going for those review meetings and when you're starting to get your second, third and fourth plans, you can see where funding may start to increase or even decrease. Once you start going through review meetings, you'll see that it can become quite bureaucratic in the way that you need a lot of documentation to prove that you need certain types of funding. So it's
advice, get whoever you work with, like if you work with a physiopodiatrist, get them to have support letters and make recommendations.
Yeah, exactly. Throughout when you write a service agreement with a provider, it should be included in that to write a report when it gets to review time. That's really imperative that any services that you link in with, that they do write that for you, so you can have that documentation when you do go to those review meetings.
Thank you so much.
That's okay. But also take along an advocate, take along a support person, take along one of your allied health if you want.
I'll do it if you need help.
Oh, thank you.
Because they can really just give you that extra confidence and sort of that support to be able to argue your point. Because sometimes, yes, they like to encourage a sort of casual environment when you have those meetings, but ultimately you still do have to show that this is a need for you, and that's why they need to keep funding that certain area of your plan. So it's really important to sort of prepare for those types of meetings so that you're in a position where you can justify those and you can argue your point.
Yeah, this is the lawyer phase of that. You know, when people say we're lawyers, this is a really good way of saying we're lawyers with the NDIS, because we can put a case forward for you and have a reasonable argument with support matters, and that puts your case forward, and they have to consider that.
That's why having if you want an advocate, or if you are feeling a little bit unsure or just nervous going into it, to reach out to those supports that can really help you and just make you feel so much more comfortable going to those types of meetings. So you are more. Sorry, Yusuf, did you say something?
I'm just asking Joy which area she's from.
As in geographically?
Yeah, yep.
I live in, you say where I living?
Yes, where you're living, yes.
Brunswick West.
So you live in Brunswick West. So you're in the same. I'm in Preston, so we're in the same geographical area, I believe it is. Brunswick West and Preston. I'm just trying to think if there's a local advocate in this area.
Well, ADEC does advocacy. We have an advocacy team, and we also have an NDIS transitional support team for those who are just starting out, maybe who are unsure of the NDIS and sort of need that assistance to apply. But advocates sort of assist with more of those review meetings, those types of issues. But yeah, there's lots of advocacy organisations out there, and they want to help people. They want to give that person the leg up so that they can get a more appropriate plan for them. So if anybody does need any contacts to be able to reach out to those types of advocacy supports, just shoot me an email and I can send you some contacts and phone numbers if you want.
Valid is one.
Yeah, there's many out there, and it just does depend on your geographic area. And sometimes if it's a child or if there's a certain type of disability, there might be one that could be a bit more specialised and suit you a bit better. So if anybody has any questions or wants to know some in their area, they can just email me and I can put together a little bit of a list for you if you like.
Thank you.
That's okay. So next we'll talk about the NDIS concept of reasonable and necessary. So this is an important concept to understand if you're wanting to apply or when you have your NDIS plan, because the NDIS only supports and services which they classify as reasonable and necessary. So I just have a few. Sorry, Yusuf?
No, I just think that's, you can't have a definitive answer to what's reasonable and necessary, because each person is individual and unique, and what is reasonable and necessary to you might not be reasonable and necessary to me. I understand that, Yusuf, but I suppose what I'm doing with this presentation is I'm just explaining what the NDIS is. I understand there is many criticisms of the NDIS. I see those barriers and those problems every day because I am part of the NDIS transitional support team, so I have client work. So I completely understand that. But I suppose we could almost take up the entire 2 hours if we wanted to talk about all the criticisms of the NDIS. And as we only have probably about 20 minutes left, and I want to leave a little bit of time at the end for any other questions, we might need to rush through just some of these key points. And then we'll have maybe just 10 minutes at the end to have any questions. Just time's ticking for us. Sure.
Okay. Sorry. No, all good, Yusuf. So I have a few points which the NDIS tend to look at if they're trying to make a decision as to whether a support is reasonable and necessary. So the first is that it relates to the person's disability. So the NDIS funding can be used for anything that relates back to the person's disability, their impairments, how it impacts on them, which means it can't be used for general things such as rent, utility bills, anything like that, because everybody, regardless if they have a disability or not, they have to pay those types of bills. So it has to relate back to the person's disability. So if you can argue that somebody finds this an issue because of their disability, thus this support is needed to support them in this area, the funding should be able to be used for that reason. The second is that it has to be value for money. So especially when we're talking about maybe getting assistive technologies or products, you'll normally do a little bit of research and see, get a few quotes and see what's out there. And if you see there are two things which really have the same, which are the same thing, the same product, there's no real difference, but one might be $200 more expensive, it would be the expectation that you would go for the cheaper option.
I disagree.
Yeah, but it should be an independent and a personal decision.
I'll tell you in a nutshell, the NDI, I was trying to get, so I had an electric stove and the hot plates were staying hot for about, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I was staying hot. And so I would burn myself, not all the time, but a lot. I'd burn myself because I'd forget that they're still hot. So I asked the NDIS to put an induction cooktop, would they support it? And they said, oh, is it reasonable and necessary? I said, what do you mean reasonable? Of course it's reasonable. I'm burning myself.
Yeah.
They go, well, there's other alternatives. I said, what are other alternatives? They go, you could put covers on them. I'm like, do you have covers on your stove? No. So then how come I have to put covers on my stove? Because I have a disability. Why can't I have my house looking like your house? Because I have a disability? Is that why I have to have these cheap looking covers and make my disability obvious? Do you know what I mean? And so I argued that, and luckily I knew Julie, not Julie, what was her name? I knew the commissioner at the time, and I put my argument forward, and through the Ministry of Housing, they were able to put it in. But I'm just saying that I disagree with it, that sometimes it's a person with a disability shouldn't be subjected to, oh, well, this is the cheapest option, so he's stuck on that, sort of thing. That's not right, because they should be entitled to have a sense of well-being and a sense of value. Okay?
No, I understand that, Yusuf, and it's great that you did push it and that you sort of kept pushing along and made sure that somebody actually acknowledged it and something was done about it. That's really great to see. But I suppose just at this point, because it is still very early, they are trying to make, although it's almost pointless to try to make structures when we're talking about disability, because everybody's disability, everybody's life is different, irregardless, even if there's two people with the same diagnosis, disability can look very different with those two people. But I suppose it's just because it is a system, you do need some regulation and some structuring around it. Otherwise it would just be, I suppose, too messy. So
then just put case by case basis. Don't put a definitive answer. Put a case by case basis.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see I definitely understand those problems, and it can make a big impact because it's something that you use every day, and it's very sort of influential.
Same things with my shoes, because I go through shoes a lot. They weren't willing to pay for my shoes. I said, well, how many pairs of shoes have you got? And they said, oh, I've got about 10. I said, well, guess what? I've got this pair of shoes that you see on me, and probably about 2 other pairs. That's all I've got.
Yeah.
I go through shoes more than most. So this is the thing that I'm trying to say. Just because the NDIS say these things, there's ways around it. You just got to put an argument forward, and you need a really, really good advocate.
Exactly. So these are sort of the guidelines that they have. But of course, as disability is very personal and it's very individual and changes from person to person, if you feel like your plan does not suit you, or sort of what the outcome has been does not suit you, you have that opportunity to review things, to push things, and to get things looked at again, and for you to be able to push your argument so that you can get the outcome that you want. Obviously, it can be a little bit difficult, so it is important to reach out to those maybe appeals officers, review officers, advocates who have those skills and knowledge to be able to really support you in getting what you need so you can live the type of life that you want. But we'll just whiz through the other points of the reasonable and necessary criteria. So the next is that it's likely to be beneficial. So basically the NDIS need to be able to see that there's some good outcomes from the type of support that you're wanting. There's evidence that it will be beneficial for you. The next is that it'll help you to achieve your goals. So we'll talk a little bit more about goals in the next few slides. But the goals are basically justification as to why you want the funding for this support. For example, if it was to improve your fine motor skills, that's a goal. So you'd be able to get funding for an OT, maybe certain grips or even cutlery to assist with your fine motor. So anything like that would be covered by a goal like that. So which is why it's important to sort of think about your goals beforehand. The next point is to assist with economic and social participation. A big sort of theme of the NDIS is to increase people with disability, their participation in a social and economic way so that they can participate in the community a bit more. So if it taps into that, that definitely strengthens your argument to get that type of support. And the last one there takes into account their situation and informal supports. So this is something to keep in mind, especially if the person with the disability is a child, as the NDIA see some things as the parent's responsibility, for example, taking them to and from appointments and things like that, as most parents would be driving their children to activities and appointments. But in saying that, it is based on the individual. So for example, I was assisting a family. Now the child had a skin sort of condition, which then impacted on her mobility and her sight and hearing and things like that. And she was still very young, so was in nappies, but the sort of regular nappies from Coles and Woolies irritated her skin and would just get really inflamed to be really terrible for her skin. So in the first plan that we got for her, basically there was no funding for her to be able to purchase nappies, because they saw that that's something that any child of her age would be needing to have anyway, so her parents should be paying for that. But we then explained to the NDIS that, in fact, the parents are needing to buy more expensive specialty nappies so that it doesn't irritate her skin, and they're having to go through more nappies because she needs more frequent changes. And when we argued that with the NDIS, then they were able to give funding to cover the gap between what a normal packet of nappies would cost and what this specialty pack would cost. So you do...
Alyssa, I just want to ask, with me, I put a case forward that because I perspire a lot, and because of the way I walk, I have to wash my clothes a hell of a lot more. So I was asking the NDIS to fund for clothing, and they said no. So, but my disability impact, because I sweat a lot, I have to wash my clothes and wash myself more. Does that mean, do you know what I mean? Like, there's an argument there, but they said no to that. So,
how long ago did you try to get that? Was it that last year or this year? Or
so last year. So this is my first plan review, like the scrolling over, it's coming up. So I guess I'm fairly new, but I'm just saying there's a lot of cases I can give you where the NDIS have rejected people for, and I reckon they've got a good argument, and I'm one of them. But because of their criteria, they've said no, and they're very anal. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that. They're very particular about their criteria, and they don't want to just give out money for clothing and stuff. They think that's an everyday thing. But I put a case for that my disability does impact on my clothing. You know, because I have to wash them more because I sweat more.
I suppose it might be a good idea to think about when you actually put that request in, because within the NDIS and this whole world, things are changing quite quickly. The NDIA are making changes and alterations, so it might even be worth like bringing it up again. And because there's a different person who would probably look at it, you may get a different outcome.
But how can I put a case forward? Because there's no one that specialises in perspiration sort of thing, you know what I mean? To give me a support letter and that. For an exercise bike, I can get my physio. For my shoes, I can get a podiatrist. Things like that to support my argument. But when it comes to something like that, there's no one that can assess that and determine and put that case forward to the NDIS, which is what they need.
You could even, I reckon you could talk to an OT or even your GP. They'd be able to write something from their perspective.
I've done that. It didn't work. Didn't work, so.
Just trying to think, it might be worth sort of coming at it from a slightly different angle. Maybe saying with your argument potentially that to purchase types of clothing that have greater aeration. I don't know. It's just sort of coming with a slightly different point of view at the same issue.
Yeah. Look, maybe we can talk about this after the session.
Yeah, of course. We're taking up time. But yeah, it's definitely worth sort of going back to these issues because things do change in NDIS regulation. So yeah, it's definitely worth talking to your LAC or support coordinator or whoever you have supporting you in that with the NDIS, because there may have been new regulations or changes that could actually support you in the topic that you're wanting support in. Okay, so within an NDIS plan, I've sort of spoken briefly about a goal. It's basically something that you would identify, something you want to try to achieve in a short-term or a long-term frame. So that could be maybe to become more independent, go to my church group, get a job, go swimming, anything like that. But these can be used to justify certain supports you get. So it's important to have a think about that before going into your planning meeting and your review meetings. The NDIS plan is, well, the budget of the plan is broken down into 3 categories. So there's core support, capacity building support, capital supports. And probably a good way to think about them is that they're 3 buckets. And once funding is in one bucket, you can't take it from one to put into the other. So once funding is put in one category, you can't really move it about. So that's another reason why you need to sort of prepare yourself and do a bit of pre-planning before going into those NDIS planning meetings, so that you know you can try to get the right amount of funding to be able to last the 12 months or the 24 or 36 months of your plan. We'll just quickly go through what core, capacity and capital sections are. So the core supports are basically things that people might be needing in their daily life to maybe complete some of those activities of daily living. This category is a little bit more flexible than the others. So you can decide a bit more if you want to use a larger percentage of your funding in that area for help in the home, if you want to use it to be able to access the community a bit more, or to maybe purchase some products for the home that can assist you with those type of tasks. So if you're wanting to purchase some products, you can use core for certain types of products. So that could be things that are what the NDIS see as low risk, low cost, which are basically things that don't cost too much and that you wouldn't really need much training to be able to use. So anything that's under $1,500, you'd be able to use core supports to purchase that. Now, if something is over that price and is maybe a bit more complex product and assistive technology, or maybe if you're wanting a home modification, vehicle modification, that's where capital supports would come into play. So anything that's a bit more complex or might be a bit more expensive, you would be using capital supports for that. I should just say, if you're wanting to get products through capital supports, it is a bit more of a process. You'll be needing your occupational therapist or like physio, whoever is more of a specialty in the product, to assist you with an application for that product, because you'll need to get quotes. If it's a home modification, you'll probably need a builder's recommendations, things like that. But you wouldn't have to worry about that necessarily. There would be the professionals there, the Allied Health, the builders and such, who would be able to sort of do that, fill out a lot of those forms for you, so you wouldn't have to worry too much about doing that. And capacity building supports are a bit more self-explanatory. They support the person to build their independence, skills, and personal capacity. A lot of the time people use this funding to access allied health, such as maybe speech therapy, occupational therapy, physio, or even attending specialty art classes where they can get the support that they need, attending maybe camps, if people need support to find the right place to live or find work, anything like that. capacity can be used for those types of things. And an NDIS plan's budget can be used in the areas of daily life, in the home, for their health and well-being, maintaining that for lifelong learning. So that's more sort of, I suppose, skills in relation to maybe paying bills, catching public transport, those types of things, to do with their work or social community participation, so going out into the community, with their relationships with social behaviours, and choice and control. So I just want to say quickly that the NDIS funding, if you request for maybe additional supports to be able to use your plan, you can do that. And that can come in the form of a support coordinator. But you do need to bring that up in a planning meeting. It's not necessarily just going to be given to somebody or brought up. And a support coordinator is basically a case manager who can help you to use your plan, implement your plan, and can help you for the whole length of your plan. So they can be your go-to NDIS support, and they can be a lot of help to somebody, especially if they have their first plan and it's all new. It's a whole new world basically, and trying to navigate that can be a bit difficult. But if you can get a support coordinator, that can really help you. And in that NDIS meeting, the LAC, which is the local area coordinator, or the sort of the NDIS representative that you meet in that meeting, will they'll ask you how you want your plan to be financially managed. Now, there's three options for that. There's NDIA managed, there's self-managed, and then there's plan managed. I've put a document up on the Dropbox which goes into more detail about these areas, but you have the freedom to choose which out of the three you would like to use for your plan. I'll just rush through the eligibility criteria, which is somebody aged between 0 and 65 years, somebody who's an Australian citizen or permanent visa holder, permanent resident, that they have a permanent disability, and that they will be needing lifelong support, and that the disability has a significant impact on the person's life. Now, if somebody is aged between 0 and 7, there's a slightly different stream for them called the Early Childhood Early Intervention, and children of that age don't necessarily need a formal diagnosis. They can have a developmental delay, and that should be able to give them access to ECEI. Now, I don't think we have much more time. There's more information about specific disability requirements because, as I was saying, it's obviously very individual disability and can vary from person to person. So the NDIS really do look at the person's disability in relation to themselves, and they need to see realistically in their daily life how the disability impacts on them. So you really need to tell them sort of what things in your home do you find more difficult? What things do you need support with? If you have support in a certain way, how does that help you? So you need to be able to show them realistically in your life, how does your disability affect you? Not necessarily what just your diagnosis is, but how that reflects in your life. And the access process can take a bit of time. For some people, it can take many months. For others, it can be a bit quicker, just depending on sort of the area that you're in. Some of the local areas are a bit quicker to get through plans and create plans, but some take a little bit longer. For example, the West in Melbourne is running a little bit slower because that was the last one to roll out. But the brief process is that you would set up a file, you would get an NDIS number, which is either 430 or 431, and then followed by another 6 numbers. And then you would start an access request. So you could do that over the phone, or you could get a form sent out to you, whichever you prefer. And now if you're calling the NDIS, you can also get a free interpreter through Tiers if you like. So that's available for anybody who's contacting NDIS. And once you have an NDIS plan, you can also access free interpreting. So once you've sent off the access request, then you need to give them the proof of your disability. So that could be a diagnosis from a specialist, or even any assessments reports that have been done. If you don't have any, however, you can go to sort of GPs, pediatricians, people in your life health medical professionals, and they might be happy to write supporting letters for you. So you can ask for some letters to be written in case you don't have any documents, which you can give straight away. Then you would hear back from the NDIA. Normally, the way they word it is access met or access not met. If your access met, you've been accepted onto the scheme. If your access not met, you haven't been. If your access met, then you'll just have that planning meeting with a representative of the NDIS, and then they'll create the plan for you, and then you can start using your plan. Now, if your access not met, then you can actually review that decision, or you can put in a new application. It's up to you, but there are options to pursue if you do get that outcome. Similarly, if you do get a plan which you don't think is adequate, you can also put in a review for that and get the plan re-looked at and hopefully get the additional support that you need. Now, sorry for having to rush through those last few slides there, but I'll pop all of this up on Dropbox and you can look at my notes, which are in the PowerPoints. But does anybody have any questions?
It's when you say Dropbox, is that the chat thing that you got down there?
So no, Dropbox is like just a separate type of thing where you can upload lots of documents into a file that many people can access. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set that up and put it all on there, and then I'm going to send out a link to everybody involved, and they should be able to access it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I put the chapter.
Yeah, I see you've brought up the topic of purchasing smart devices from NDIS funding. So there have been recent changes to, in the current climate of coronavirus, where some people are able to use a section of their funding to purchase maybe an iPad or something like that, so that they can engage with telehealth, because some people are no longer able to maybe see their allied health professionals because of the restrictions in place.
Yeah.
So there have been a few changes like that. If that does apply to you, I would really encourage talking to maybe your plan manager or LAC.
Yeah.
And they can see if that applies to you and then assist you to sort of get that sorted.
So just ask the plan manager.
Yeah. So do you have a support coordinator, Joy?
A support coordinator, my boy support coordinator is local coordinator.
So you have the local area coordinator. Yeah, I would say it's probably easier. You'd probably get a quicker response from your plan manager than you would.
Plan manager is Adek.
Oh, it's Kathleen. Okay. Kathleen. Yeah, talk to Kathleen. She would be all over that, and she'd be able to give you a proper yes or no if you'd be able to do that. So yeah, just talk to Kathleen, I would say.
Yeah, she just sent me a message, the email, talk about this. So I just need to send back the email, ask for this.
So if you're wanting to access that, I would recommend talking to your support person, and they would know your sort of
plan manager
situation. Yeah, and then they can recommend if that would.
Because now it's coronavirus, so my boy cannot see the speech therapist. So it's good for them in the face-to-face. So he hasn't got the iPad at the moment. He cannot use. He always use his young brother. Young brother have to go online with study, so he cannot use his brother's one. So it's good for him to use the iPad to contact with another speech or OT.
Yeah. So I would recommend talking to Kathleen, because it sounds like it, because he's not actually able to contact his or have therapy from his
thank you so much.
It would be most likely he'd be able to access it. So.
Oh, thank you so much.
No, that's all right. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Alyssa, I've got a question, but I thought maybe I should wait till if you got 5 minutes. I have a scenario, a personal scenario with my nephew.
If you want to talk about personals, you can send me an email, or I can, because I have your email, and I can give you my phone number and we can have a chat if you like.
I reckon that would be great, because I think I got something that I need help with, because I don't know how else to help.
Yeah, no worries. I'll send you an email with my contacts and we can have a chat about that. That's fine.
Perfect. Thanks.
Any others from anybody else?
Thank you so much.
No, that's all right, Joy. Okay, if that's everything,
Thanks
Then,
for facilitating, Alyssa.
no,
Really,
that's all right. Yeah. So we aim to see each other in person, but at least we can use our technology and use Zoom to still run this. So tomorrow we will be having Hayesa. She'll be talking about mental health and self-care, which is a very good and insightful presentation. I really encourage everybody who can watch that tomorrow. So yes, 10:30 to 11:30 tomorrow. So it's just a 1 hour, a bit shorter because she's just covering the one topic of mental health. So yes, I'll see you all tomorrow morning then. But yeah, any other questions, you can feel free to email me.
great.
Thank you. Have a good day,
Thanks,
everyone.
Martha.
Yes, you
You
too.
too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.